Have you ever heard a story so strange, so impossible, that your mind refuses to believe it really happened? In today's episode, you'll hear 5 real events that sound like pure fiction, but every one of them is documented, recorded, and still deeply unsolved. Events that confuse historians, frustrate scientists, and terrify investigators. Welcome to Dark Curiosity Hub. Let's begin. Our first mystery takes us nearly 9 centuries into the past, to the rolling fields of medieval England. The year was sometime in the mid-1100s. The village of Woolpit, a small farming settlement in Suffolk, was known for its quiet days, its working fields, and its deep wolf pits dug into the earth to protect livestock. On an otherwise normal afternoon, 2 farmers harvesting near the pits noticed movement in the tall grass. At first, they thought it was an animal, but when they approached, they froze. Standing at the edge of the pit, frightened, confused, and trembling, were 2 young children, a boy and a girl. And their skin was entirely green, not pale, not sickly, not tinted by mud or dye, but an unmistakable, unnatural shade of green. They wore clothes made of a weave no one recognized. The fabric was coarse, oddly colored, and stitched in a pattern unfamiliar to any tailor in the region. When the villagers approached, the children backed away, terrified. They spoke to each other rapidly in a language no one had ever heard. Not Latin, not Flemish, not French, not English. A language completely unknown. The villagers carried them into Woolpit gently, giving them food and water. But to their shock, the children refused everything. Bread, meat, vegetables. They wouldn't touch any of it. Days passed, and the children grew weaker, until someone brought raw green beans, freshly pulled from the stalk. The moment the pods were placed before them, the children lunged toward the beans, but not to eat the seeds. They tore open the pods and ate the beans directly from the shell, as if this was the only food they understood. Gradually, they adapted. They learned to eat normal foods. And slowly, their green complexion began to fade. But their story was only beginning. The boy, still weak from starvation, died a few months later. The girl survived, and over time learned to speak English. And when she finally could communicate, she revealed something unbelievable. She said she and her brother came from a place she called the Land of St. Martin. A land underground, a place with no sun, only a perpetual twilight, like the moments just after sunset. Everything there, she said, had a greenish hue. The plants, the sky, even the people. She said she and her brother were tending their family's flocks near a large cavern. They heard a strange bell-like sound echoing through the tunnels, a sound they had never heard before. Curious, they followed it. They walked deeper and deeper into the passage until they reached a blinding opening, a place where the light was stronger and whiter than anything they had seen. And then they stumbled out into a world of sunlight, the world of Woolpit. When she tried to go back, she couldn't find the entrance. She never saw her home again. Chroniclers of the era, Ralph of Cagishol and William of Newburgh, both respected historians, recorded the story in detail. They wrote that the girl eventually grew up, learned English fluently, worked in a noble household, and lived the rest of her life in the human world. But the question remains, where did they really come from? Were they orphaned children from another village? Victims of disease? Tainted by strange minerals? Refugees fleeing war? Or did they truly emerge from some underground realm? A forgotten culture, or a place lost to time? 8 centuries later, the mystery remains unsolved. The children appeared. One survived, one died. Their story was written down by 2 historians, and that is all we know. A mystery as strange today as it was in the 12th century. Chicago, 1987. A city of millions, lit by neon television antennas, and the hum of late-night broadcasts. It was November 22nd, a quiet Sunday evening. Across the city, thousands of people were settling into their nightly routine. Sports, news, late-night movies. But then, at 9:14 p.m., something happened that no one expected. Something that, to this day, remains one of the most sophisticated unsolved cybercrimes in American history. The local channel WGN was broadcasting a sports segment. The anchor was mid-sentence, when suddenly the screen flickered. The picture warped, horizontal lines tore across the image. And then, a figure appeared. A person wearing a rubber Max Headroom mask, the iconic 1980s character known for his glitchy speech, jerky movements, and artificial personality. But this was no parody. No joke. No scheduled broadcast. This was an illegal intrusion. A complete takeover of the station's signal. Behind the masked figure, a sheet of metal spun erratically. A makeshift background imitating the real Max Headroom aesthetic. No audio came through, just silent, eerie motion. The interruption lasted 30 seconds. Engineers at WGN quickly switched the broadcast feed to another transmitter, and the signal returned to normal. Shaken, but thinking it was just a technical glitch, they continued with programming. They had no idea what was coming next. At 11:15 p.m., 2 hours later, another Chicago station, WTTW, was airing Doctor Who. Millions of fans were watching the episode Horror of Fang Rock when the villain appeared on screen. But suddenly, the Doctor vanished. The screen glitched again, and the same masked figure reappeared. This time, with sound, a distorted, metallic voice. Unintelligible words. Creepy laughter. Strange, high-pitched noises, and movements that felt chaotic, unpredictable, and deeply unsettling. This was no simple prank. This was deliberate. The intruder spoke in bizarre phrases, quoted commercials, hummed melodies, waved a can of soda, even referenced television. He moved in jerky, exaggerated gestures, as if he were glitching in real life. Then the most disturbing moment, another figure entered the frame. Wearing a maid outfit, holding a fly swatter, the masked intruder bent over. The second figure raised the fly swatter, and the screen went black. The entire hijack lasted nearly 90 seconds. WTTW could do nothing. The hijacker had completely overpowered their broadcast signal. What happened that night was not just illegal, it was nearly impossible with 1980s technology. To hijack a TV station, you would need a transmitter powerful enough to override the station's signal, and positioned precisely in the directional path of the station's broadcast tower. T's. Requisite engineering knowledge, specialized equipment, perfect timing access to high-power broadcasting hardware, deep understanding of Chicago's signal infrastructure. Even the FCC admitted whoever did this had technical intelligence. Unnerving. Investigators traced the interference to somewhere near Chicago's west side, but the search ended abruptly. No suspects, no fingerprints, no equipment located, no motive found. The hijacker had simply vanished. Over the decades, countless theories surfaced. A rogue TV engineer, a disgruntled station employee, a group of broadcast hackers, a college radio prank, gone extreme. A professional with military-grade telecom knowledge, but none fit the evidence perfectly. The equipment needed would have been expensive, heavy, traceable. And yet the intruder disappeared, as if they had never existed. The FCC offered a $100,000 reward. No one claimed it. Not one credible lead has emerged. In the years since, the Max Headroom hijacking has become a case study in cybersecurity, a legend in broadcast history, a symbol of unsolved media intrusion, and one of the most iconic mysteries of the 1980s, despite modern forensic video analysis, despite thousands of online investigators. Despite decades of speculation, no one knows who the masked figure was. No one knows how he hijacked 2 major broadcast stations, and no one knows what message, if any, he was trying to send. It remains one of the most chilling, unsolved moments ever captured on television. And perhaps the most disturbing part is this: the hijacker was never caught, never identified, never heard from again. A ghost in the signal, a face behind a mask, a broadcast intrusion that should have been impossible, yet it happened. Our third mystery begins in the winter of 1959, in one of the coldest, most remote places on Earth, the Ural Mountains in the Soviet Union. 10 experienced hikers, students, and graduates of the Ural Polytechnic Institute set out on an expedition to reach Otorten, a mountain whose name, in the local Mansi language, means, "Don't go there." They were led by a seasoned hiker named Igor. They were young. They were skilled. They were prepared. One member, however, turned back early due to health issues. His name was Yuri Yudin. He would later say that decision saved his life. The remaining 9 pressed on. They kept a detailed diary. They took photographs. In the last pictures, they seemed happy building a ski shelter, smiling in the snow, joking. Then the entries stopped. They never arrived at their destination. When the group failed to return on schedule, search parties were organized. What they found didn't just disturb investigators. It haunted them for decades. The search team first located the tent. It was still standing, but badly damaged. Snow had partially covered it. The tent was empty. Inside were boots, clothes, food, equipment, everything hikers would desperately need to survive in sub-zero temperatures. The most disturbing detail, the canvas of the tent had been cut open from the inside. It looked as if the hikers had slashed their way out in a hurry without using the front entrance. Rescuers then followed a series of tracks in the snow. Some were left by bare feet, some by socks, some by only one shoe. All led toward the edge of a nearby forest. At the forest line, under a tall cedar tree, the search team discovered the first 2 bodies. They were stripped almost to their underwear. No shoes, no jackets. Despite the freezing conditions, a small fire had been started nearby, but had long since gone out. The branches of the cedar above them were broken, as if someone had climbed it in panic, or tried to escape something. Over the next few days, rescuers found 3 more bodies, including Dyatlov himself, scattered between the cedar tree and the tent, as if they had tried to crawl back to camp, but collapsed along the way. Their positions suggested they were desperately trying to survive, but their injuries were minor. They seemed to have died from exposure and exhaustion. Then, month passed. When the snow finally melted, the remaining 4 bodies were discovered in a ravine deeper in the woods. And these 4 were different. 1 had a cracked skull. 2 had severe chest fractures, as if they'd been hit by an enormous force. But there were no external wounds, no bruises, no cuts. A medical expert said the damage was similar to what you'd see in a car crash. 1 woman had her eyes missing, another, her tongue. Some of the hikers' clothing showed elevated levels of radiation. The official Soviet investigation listed the cause of death as an unknown compelling force. That was it. No explanation, no theory. Just a phrase that said everything and nothing. Over the decades, theories multiplied. Some blamed a secret military test, missiles, mines, or experimental weapons. Others suggested paradoxical undressing, a phenomenon where hypothermic victims remove clothing as their body fails. Some claimed inhuman attacks. Others thought of infrasound created by the wind, causing uncontrollable panic and disorientation. Recent studies argued for a small slab avalanche that might have crushed part of the group and forced them to flee. But many details still don't fit. Why was the tent cut from the inside? Why were some victims barefoot in the snow? Why were such extreme internal injuries present, while the skin remained intact? Why the radiation? Why the missing tongue? No one truly knows what those 9 hikers saw, or what they felt that night on Dyatlov Pass. Only that, whatever it was terrifying enough to make experienced mountaineers rush half-dressed into a deadly blizzard and never come back. Our fourth mystery begins not with fire or light, but with rain. At least, that's what people thought it was. August 7th, 1994. Oakville, Washington, a small, quiet town surrounded by forests and fields. Around 3 a.m., rain clouds rolled in. Residents woke to the familiar sound of droplets hitting their roofs, roads, and windows. Nothing unusual until someone stepped outside. Instead of water, they felt something different, thicker, heavier, strange. Looking closer, they saw it, covering cars, grass, porches, and streets, was a semi-transparent, gelatinous substance. Not liquid, not ice. Something in between. It was colorless, but faintly cloudy, soft, sticky, and clumped together. People began to poke it, press it between their fingers, examine it. And that's when the first symptoms appeared. Within hours, dozens of residents started to feel sick. Nausea, dizziness, difficulty breathing, blinding headaches. Doctors later reported that some patients developed severe inner ear infections. Others came down with intense flu-like symptoms. Pets became ill. Some animals died. This wasn't a one-time event. Over the next 3 days, the strange blobs fell from the sky 5 more times. No one had ever seen anything like it. One resident, a woman named Dottie Hearn, grew so sick she had to be hospitalized. Her daughter insisted that the blobs were connected to her illness. So they collected samples. A local police officer, curious and suspicious, scraped some of the material into a vial and sent it to a lab. What they found only deepened the mystery. Under the microscope, the gelatinous material appeared to contain cells, not dirt, not plastic, not chemicals, but biological components. Lab technicians reported seeing what looked like white blood cells, without being able to identify any complete organism the cells could belong to. In other words, it was biological, but not from any known animal. Another lab later suggested the samples contained 2 types of bacteria, one of which is sometimes found in the human digestive system. The implications were disturbing. Was this some kind of biological waste? A failed experiment, a byproduct of something falling apart in the atmosphere. Some residents suspected military involvement. They claimed they had seen military aircraft in the area days before the rain of blobs. Others theorized that bombs or testing in the upper atmosphere might have somehow caused fragmented material, even decayed organic matter, to fall back down. The military denied any connection. Meteorologists said it wasn't hail, wasn't seafoam, wasn't a known weather phenomenon. No official explanation was ever given. The Oakville Blobs stopped falling as suddenly as they began. The rain went back to being just rain. But people never forgot the days when it didn't, and the sky dropped something sickening, alien, and unexplainable onto their town. To this day, the Oakville Blobs remain one of the most unsettling and poorly understood weather events ever recorded. Not quite a weapon, not quite a disease, not quite natural. Just something that came from above and left more questions than answers. Our final mystery is not ancient. It is not buried in old documents. It is happening right now, and it begins. Wheat, a sound. In late 2016, a U.S. diplomat in Havana, Cuba, noticed something strange in his home. A sharp, focused, metallic sound. Not a loud explosion, not a constant hum. Something like a high-pitched beam of noise. Localized, targeted. He reported feeling a sudden pressure in his skull. His ears rang. His vision blurred. He grew dizzy and disoriented. He assumed it would pass. It didn't. Soon, other embassy staff began reporting similar experiences. They described piercing noises coming from a specific direction, intense pressure in the head, nausea, confusion, difficulty concentrating, and afterward, a feeling that something inside their brain had changed. Medical examinations showed symptoms similar to concussions, but with no blow to the head. Some had trouble with memory. others with balance. Some experienced lasting hearing loss. The media began to call it the Havana Syndrome. At first, it sounded like a conspiracy theory, mysterious sonic attacks against diplomats. But then, cases appeared in China, in Russia, in Europe, even in Washington, D.C. Intelligence officers, embassy staff, military personnel, dozens, hundreds, reported nearly identical symptoms. By some counts, close to 1,000 people may have been affected. The U.S. government ordered investigations. Teams of neurologists, acoustics, experts, weapons analysts, and psychiatrists all examined the evidence. No one could agree. Some believed it was a directed energy weapon, using microwaves or ultrasound to disrupt the brain. Others thought it might be a kind of mass psychogenic illness, a psychological chain reaction triggered by stress and fear. But brain scans of some victims revealed real physical changes. Small regions of the brain appeared altered. Connectivity patterns were different. Something had happened. But what? Intelligence agencies quietly searched for signs of hostile technology, mobile transmitters, targeted beams, experimental hardware. Nothing conclusive was ever made public. Reports were written, classified, rewritten. Official statements leaned toward no clear evidence of a foreign weapon. Unofficially, many remained unconvinced. The most disturbing detail: there was no pattern. Incidents occurred in hotels, homes, embassies, even near the White House. Sometimes one person was affected, sometimes several. No clear device was found. No single country was definitively blamed. Just a growing list of people with damaged health, and no clear cause. Havana Syndrome sits at the uneasy intersection of neurology, acoustics, espionage, and fear. Is it a new form of weapon? A complex psychological phenomena, or something we don't yet have the language or the technology to describe? No one knows. But as more cases quietly appear across the world, one thing is clear. Whatever is happening, it's not over. As we reach the end of today's journey, one thing becomes clear. The world is far stranger than we like to believe. From children with green skin appearing out of nowhere, to a masked figure hijacking live television. 2 hikers fleeing into a frozen night with no explanation. 2 gelatin falling from the sky. 2 modern diplomats struck by an invisible force. These mysteries span centuries, countries, and cultures, yet every one of them leaves the same unanswered question. What really happened? Science has theories, investigators have guesses, but the truth remains hidden. Maybe lost in history, maybe buried deep underground, maybe waiting in a lab report that no one has seen, or maybe just beyond the edges of what we're allowed to understand. If one of these stories unsettled you or made you rethink what you believe is possible, tell us in the comments below. And if you'd like to continue exploring the unexplained, subscribe to Dark Curiosity Hub and join us every week as we uncover more real mysteries that challenge everything we think we know. Because here, the truth is always stranger than the fiction.